In a dead valley where no river flows, in a land scorched by the desert sun, there once stood a city carved into stone. Not built, carved, hewn into the face of a canyon, hidden behind walls of crimson rock, forgotten by time itself. They called it Petra, the rose-red city, bold, defiant, and alive with purpose, a place born not from peace, but from struggle. Long before Rome swallowed the world, before Alexander crossed the known earth, Petra rose like a whisper in the wind and dared the world to listen. Behind its narrow gorge, the Nabateans built an empire with no permission. Nomads turned kings, traders turned warriors. They bent the desert to their will, trapped the rain, carved water out of stone, and from the heart of nothing, they built everything. But Petra wasn't just beautiful, it was dangerous, and power, when it does not bow, must be broken. So the world came in armor, the Greeks, the Romans, and later silence, the kind that follows conquest. They did not come to burn the city, they came to erase it. The Nabateans fought, with cunning, with fury, with fire in their blood and stone in their hands. But even rock can crack, even kings can fall. The legions didn't need to take Petra by force. They waited, bought its silence, starved its glory, and slowly, Petra faded, not in flames but in forgetting. The temples emptied, the tombs crumbled, the water stopped flowing, and the voices of a proud people were swallowed by sand. Centuries passed, kingdoms rose and fell, and Petra, once the heart of the desert, vanished. Until one day, in 1812, a lone traveler disguised himself as a Bedouin and entered the canyon. And what he saw stole his breath. Columns, tombs, altars, thrones, all carved into living stone, all waiting for someone to remember. Petra was never lost. Petra was buried, not by time, but by betrayal. This is its story. There are stories carved in stone, hidden in tombs, whispered through ruins. Secrets they never taught in school, because some truths were never meant to be told. Here on Secrets of the Ancient World, we don't just explore history, we decode it, piece by piece, lie by lie, until the truth finally rises. If you've ever felt like the past was deeper than what they told us, if you're drawn to the shadows beneath the pyramids and the questions buried beneath centuries of silence, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Secrets of the Ancient World and discover what was never meant to survive time. Before Petra became legend, it was only wilderness, a vast, unforgiving land, a place of rock and fire, wind-swept ravines, sun-blasted cliffs, no rivers, no fields, no safety. To the empires of the world, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, this region was a dead zone, a nowhere, a place between civilizations, and so they left it untouched. But for the forgotten, the displaced, the unwanted, it was an opportunity. Around the 6th century BCE, the first Nabateans arrived. They were not kings. They were not warriors. They were wanderers, Arab nomads pushed by hunger, war, and drought. They came with nothing except the will to survive. And that was enough. They learned to read the desert like scripture. They moved in silence, guided by stars and memory. They mapped the hidden wells. They traded with faraway lands, frankincense from Arabia, silk from the east, spices from India. They were everywhere and nowhere, a people of smoke and shadow. But then they stopped running. They found a canyon, narrow, impenetrable, invisible unless you knew the way. It wasn't just shelter. It was sanctuary, a slit in the earth that could become a kingdom. And there, they carved. The early Nabateans did what no empire dared. They claimed the silence. They sculpted tombs in cliffs. They hewed shrines into rock. And above all, they built cisterns, water, in the desert. Impossible, and yet they made it flow. They mastered the art of hydrology, hidden dams, rock-cut channels, reservoirs buried in stone. Petra became a city fed by rain, unseen by the sky, a miracle of engineering and secrecy. As centuries passed, the nomads grew bold. They adopted writing, Aramaic, and then their own Nabatean script. They built altars to forgotten gods, Dushara, Al-Uzza, deities of rock and sky. But theirs was no quiet devotion. The Nabateans were merchants, and they guarded their roots with knives. They taxed every caravan that passed through their land, and if any dared bypass them, they disappeared into the canyon and never came out. By the 4th century BCE, Petra was no longer a refuge. It was a power, a city of elites, priests and warriors, a capital without walls, because the land itself was its fortress. At its height, the Nabatean kingdom stretched from Damascus to the Red Sea. Their coinage bore the heads of kings, their enemies whispered their name, and their architecture defied belief. The treasury, the monastery, the royal tombs, each structure carved by hand, each face chiseled smooth, precise, eternal. Not just homes for the dead, but warnings to the living. This city was not meant to be erased. And yet, the world beyond Petra was changing. Greece had risen, then Rome, and to them, the Nabateans were a problem. A desert people who refused to bow. A city of stone standing in the way of empire. The shadows were growing longer. The desert winds whispered of war, and Petra stood ready. Petra was no accident. It was strategy. It was survival. It was supremacy carved into stone. By the 3rd century BCE, the Nabateans were no longer the desert's secret. They were its master. Their kings wore gold. Their priests held power. Their merchants rode with armed escorts and knew the price of every grain of incense, every drop of myrrh. From Gaza to Damascus, from Arabia to the Mediterranean, trade passed through Petra, or it didn't pass at all. At the center of it all stood King Aretas. One name, passed down through generations, each ruler bearing it like a crown, and a curse. Aretas I turned Petra into a kingdom. Aretas II fought off Arab rivals, but it was Aretas III who dared to challenge the empires themselves. Aretas III, King of Kings, marched on Damascus. His banners flew over Syria. His warriors bled Rome's allies in open battle. He didn't just survive, he expanded. But expansion breeds enemies. And far to the west, in the halls of marble and ambition, Rome took notice. To the Senate, Petra was more than a nuisance. It was an insult. A desert kingdom taxing Roman trade, defying Roman will, refusing Roman chains. And so, the pressure began. At first, it was whispers. Client kings offered gold to betray Nabatean roots. Then came spies, diplomats, assassins cloaked in smiles. But Petra held. It held with cunning, with stone, with water. No city on earth had what Petra had. Secret aqueducts tunneled through cliffs, enormous reservoirs hid beneath stone courtyards. While enemies thirsted in the sun, Petra drank from the sky. And while other kingdoms fell to steal, Petra outlasted with silence. Rome tried to starve her, but Petra fed itself, Rome tried to break her through diplomacy, but her kings knew how to smile and lie. King Obodas I turned Roman pressure into Nabatean pride. He claimed divine status after defeating invading Greek forces, declaring himself a god, and was buried in a temple carved high into the mountain. That temple still stands. But not all wars are won in the desert. Rome changed its tactics. Petra's enemies were no longer legions, but coins, treaties, and poisoned alliances. When Aretas IV came to power, Petra was at its peak. Called the friend of his people, he reigned over a city flush with wealth, carved with elegance, humming with incense smoke and the clang of bronze. The facades became grander, the tombs more ornate. Nabatean script danced across stone in graceful swirls. And yet, cracks had begun to form. Rome was patient, and it never forgot. In 40 BCE, the Nabateans became entangled in Roman civil war. Aretas supported the wrong general and drew the wrath of Mark Antony himself. Roman retaliation was swift, brutal, and humbling. But Petra survived. Again. Like a shadow, it slipped through history's hands. It thrived for decades longer, even as Rome expanded, swallowing neighbors whole. Nabatean engineers built roads to rival Rome's own. Their architects blended Egyptian, Assyrian, and Hellenistic styles, not to imitate, but to declare, "We are all of you, and none of you." But the 1st century CE brought something Petra had never faced before: time. The incense trade began to falter. New sea routes bypassed Petra entirely. Wealth slowed, and with it, influence. And then came Rome's final move. In 106 CE, under Emperor Trajan, Rome annexed the Nabatean kingdom without lifting a single sword. There was no great siege, no decisive battle, only the signing of a decree and the silence of a king. Petra was absorbed into Arabia Petraea, a Roman province. Her royalty faded into myth, her gods became relics, and yet the city still stood, carved into stone, watching, waiting. She had survived invasion, bribery, betrayal, but the next enemy would not come with banners or armor. It would come in shadows. Petra did not fall in a single night. There was no great battle, no final cry echoing through its canyons, no foreign flag planted over its temples. It died quietly, piece by piece, breath by breath. After Rome annexed the Nabatean kingdom in 106 CE, the city was absorbed into an empire that did not need it, but feared what it had once represented. The roads remained. The facade still shone in the sun. But the soul of Petra, the independence, the ingenuity, the Nabatean defiance, was slowly strangled. Roman governors replaced Nabatean kings. Latin bled into Aramaic. Temples were rededicated to Roman gods. The great tombs were left to the winds. The empire didn't destroy Petra. It erased her. By the 2nd century, the incense routes, once Petra's lifeblood, had been rerouted entirely to the sea. What had taken caravans weeks to carry, Roman ships now ferried in days. And Petra, once the crossroads of the desert, became a detour no one needed. Her market squares grew silent. Her reservoirs dried from neglect. Her warriors became peasants, her merchants scattered, but nature was not yet finished. In 363 CE, the earth roared. A violent earthquake shattered the land. Columns fell, water channels cracked open, entire facades sheared from the cliffs and collapsed in clouds of red dust. The city groaned as if the gods themselves had turned their faces away. And Petra bled. What little remained was buried beneath rubble. Rome didn't rebuild. Why would it? Petra was no longer an asset. It was an echo. Christianity had begun to spread, and the last Nabatean temples were closed or converted. The old gods, Dushara, Al-Uzza, were outlawed, their statues smashed, their priests hunted. What had once been holy was now heresy. The people who remained lived in the cracks, shepherds, monks, refugees. They whispered stories of kings who had once commanded the desert but dared not speak them aloud. Then came the Byzantines, then the Islamic caliphates, and with every new ruler, Petra faded deeper. By the 7th century, it had vanished from maps. Travelers no longer knew its name. Scholars debated whether it had ever existed at all. The world forgot, and in its place, only silence. But silence in Petra is never truly empty, because the stones remember. Every column that still stands remembers the kings who defied Rome. Every tomb carved into the cliffs holds not just bones, but pride, resistance, and sorrow. Petra did not fall in fire. It did not drown in blood. It was smothered by politics, by progress, by faith, by time. Its punishment was not destruction. It was erasure, and yet, even now, it endures. Cut off, buried, lost, but not gone, because carved in stone, no matter how forgotten, truth waits, and Petra is still waiting. For centuries Petra slept. The wind became its only visitor, the sun its only priest. Its facades weathered, its gods vanished, its name faded from history. No armies came, no pilgrims returned, no maps bore its image. It was as if the earth itself had conspired to swallow it, but the stones never gave up their memory. They waited. Buried beneath dust, draped in silence, Petra stood frozen, like a ghost king staring across eternity, watching the world forget. But not forever. In the year 1812, a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as an Arab pilgrim. Fluent in Arabic, wrapped in local cloth, he wandered the sands, asking dangerous questions, chasing old rumors that no one took seriously anymore. They called it the City of Tombs, the forbidden place, cursed, guarded. But Burckhardt pressed on, and then, through a slit in the cliffs, he saw it. The sick opened before him like the mouth of a god, narrow and twisting. For hours he walked in silence, every step echoing with centuries of abandonment. And then, like a revelation, it appeared. Columns, sculpted walls, the massive facade of Al-Kazna, the treasury, carved into the red rock as if a giant had sculpted the mountain itself. Burckhardt stood frozen. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a foreigner laid eyes on Petra. It had waited. And now, it was remembered. Word spread across Europe like fire. Adventurers followed, archaeologists, imperial powers. Each wanted a piece of the forgotten city. Each carved their names into the silence. But Petra was no longer Nabatean. It was no longer Roman. It belonged to the past, and to all who now sought to uncover it. Excavations began. Maps were drawn. Tombs were catalogued. The facades, the cisterns, the temples, all studied, photographed, claimed. Yet even in discovery, Petra remained mysterious. No one could explain how a people with no empire, no great armies, no wide territories, had built a city so powerful, so refined, so enduring. The Nabateans left no scrolls, no epics, no grand monuments to conquest, only stone, only silence. And in that silence, questions echoed. Who were they? Why did they vanish? How did they tame the desert? And what warning did they leave behind? As the modern world advanced, Petra transformed again. Tourists arrived in droves. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site. Governments fenced it. Cameras captured it. It became a postcard, a backdrop, a wonder. But for those who walk through the sick, who touch the chisel marks left behind by unknown hands, Petra is more than a ruin. It is a message of what ambition can create, of what oppression can erase, and of what time can never truly silence. Petra was carved from stone, but its true legacy was carved from defiance. It was a city built by those no one expected to survive, let alone thrive. Nomads, traders, outsiders, a people without empire who dared to shape the mountains to their will. They did not raise towers of iron. They did not conquer with legions. They conquered time, with water, with silence, with stone, and in doing so, they left behind a truth that still stands. Greatness is not always loud. It doesn't always wear crowns or march with banners. Sometimes it hides in a canyon. Sometimes it waits for centuries to be heard. Petra reminds us that brilliance is fragile, that beauty can be buried, that entire civilizations, no matter how advanced, how disciplined, how inspired, can be erased not in war, but in neglect. And yet, Petra survived, not because of conquest, but because it was carved into the bones of the earth. It outlived its kings, its conquerors, its gods. It became a whisper across time, a monument not just to what was, but to what remains when everything else is taken. Today, as tourists walk its paths and scholars debate its mysteries, Petra stands as a silent witness to ambition, to oppression, to memory. It forces us to ask, what will we leave behind? What will endure when our empires fall, our voices fade, our names vanish from stone? The Nabateans are gone, but their spirit, the courage to build in a place where nothing should grow, the audacity to exist when the world refused to see them, that spirit lives on, in every canyon, in every pillar, in every forgotten place, where greatness still waits to be found. Because Petra was never truly lost. It was waiting. And now we remember another secret brought back into the light. But the ancient world is vast, and its silence is never empty. If this story stirred something in you, if the past felt closer than ever before, then subscribe to Secrets of the Ancient World and walk deeper with us into what time tried to erase. Because the truth was never lost, it was buried